Is your work making you sick? And how should companies approach employee wellness from a holistic perspective? Clearly, we spend an awful lot of our adult lives working. In the United States, for instance, it has been estimated that individuals will spend roughly 1/3 of our lives at work. And that doesn't even take into account the increasingly eroding barrier between our personal lives on one hand and our work lives on the other hand. This can be especially true for we Americans who will often wear working vacation or workation as a badge of courage and dedication to our jobs. It seems that we love to work, but also are we dying at work? And I'm not just talking about things like children working at the looms or coal miners working in the coal mines and getting black lung disease or working on a fishing boat in the deadliest catch. Now, obviously, there are jobs that are inherently dangerous and come with a lot of risk. But it turns out that all work, no matter how inherently dangerous or safe it might be, can have negative impacts on our well being. Now, when we're talking about this idea of the impact of work on our overall well being, there is one concept that I find particularly interesting, and that's the psychosocial work environment. And that concept can be summarized as follows. Quote, the psychosocial work environment is a key research field for understanding how the interrelation of societal structures, environmental exposures, and psychological and psychophysiological processes affect health and illness in terms of our work. As a sociologist, it's really not terribly surprising to hear that what happens around us in the world around us is going to have an impact on our lives. It's kind of like hearing that the new pope is Catholic, or that my teenager is on her phone again, or that an email could have been sufficient to substitute for a meeting. I mean, did we have to meet? Couldn't you just send me an email for it? Why are we all here? For those who aren't sociologists, it is important to recognize that it is not just our work that impacts our wellness, but the ways in which our work and our environment and our personal life can intersect. How our personal lives and the society in which we live, and our personal psychological and biological makeup, and our workplace all intersect with one another to produce health outcomes. Here's a diagram from the authors Cooper and Davison to illustrate this. And I apologize, the diagram is fuzzy. No need to adjust your television. It's not your eyes getting worse. In this diagram, we have the work arena, the home arena, the social arena, and the individual arena. There's a lot going on within each of these arenas that can lead to stressful outcomes, or what's called the manifestation arena that affect work. One of the things I really like about this model is that it forces us to think about these things from a systems perspective. And looking at things from a systems perspective has gained greater currency and legitimacy and attention. It's important to remember that the interconnectedness of things was originally introduced in such works as If You Give a Moose a Muffin or If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, as well as the lesser known work If You Give a Pig a Pancake. And I don't want to ruin the ending of If You Give a Pig a Pancake, but it doesn't end well for the pig. The academic origins of research on the psychosocial work environment can't really be traced to one person or one place, but there is a strong European and especially Scandinavian influence on its development. In fact, psychosocial policy has been developed in European countries and European Parliament in 1999, considering, quote, that work must be adapted to people's abilities and needs and not vice versa. Looking at this greater body of research, we can see that its goal is to understand how to create better employee experiences so that workers can thrive and not experience negative health outcomes, or at least minimize those negative outcomes, whether they be physical health or mental health. In general, quote, researchers on psychosocial work environments provide some guidance. It suggests that workers are more likely to thrive when they have autonomy that feels like control rather than abandonment, and flexibility and clarity that allows for a good work life balance. They also need security that offers certainty in the present and confidence in the future. The importance of this research isn't just in how work can negatively impact people, but also how it can negatively impact the ability to do their jobs as a result. Quote, dissatisfied, unmotivated, and stressed workers tend to have more health problems. Sick people tend to be less productive, to be absent from work more often, and to be more inclined to change jobs. Job satisfaction, health, organizational commitment, and productivity go hand in hand. If that wasn't bad enough, quote, unfavorable psychosocial work factors are associated with poorer worker health, such as depression and cardiovascular disease. I mean, all that sounds pretty horrible. So the next question is, how do we fix it? One step is to contact the organizational consultant Bob, the organization culture builder, whose motto is, can we fix it? Yes, we can. While this is a larger topic, one article talks about three conditions vital to the modern work experience: autonomy, boundary management, and precarity. Precarity here is generally referring to the sense with which a person feels safe or vulnerable in their job. When I talk about employee experience, when I teach courses on employee experience, I use an expanded model of improving employee experience that I call the straight A framework. And I named it that because I'm a professor and I grade people, and straight A's is really good. In my framework, you can see that there are a lot of elements to consider, which are all important to employee experience. However, all these elements have to do with what happens at the workplace. There is a lot going on outside of work that is important as well. There is a lot going on outside of work that is important as well. In a lot of ways, this is not dissimilar to how we are now thinking about health in terms of social determinants of health, and that health and wellness are impacted by many different factors that interact together. So, what do organizations do about all of this? One thing is to remember that your employees are your first customers, and you are only going to be as good as they are in a position to do well. That means remembering that their lives don't stop at your doors in terms of the impacts that their lives can have on their work. There is a saying of leaving your life at the door, and that's not really possible for most, if not any of us. Now, some organizations will provide support for mental health services and family support services along with traditional health services. And those can all be really important as a step to improving the psychosocial work environment. Another thing to consider or to take a look at historically was the proliferation of DEI programs after the murder of George Floyd, along with other instances that led to the Black Lives Matter movement. This addition of DEI programs was in recognition of the social impacts on workers that these events had and the need of the organizations to recognize that and do something about it to support their workers in their workplace and in their lives. Another thing to keep in mind is that employee experience is about creating organizations that support the development of employees and not create employees that support the development of the organization. It should be clear that when employees do better, organizations will do better. At the same time, it can't be said that if organizations are doing better, that employees are automatically doing better as well. There's a lot of examples of organizations doing better at the expense of employees. And so we want to make sure that organizations are doing better because they're doing better by their employees. Creating pathways to support lives outside of work can be important as well. There's been a lot made of work from home, flex schedules, flex time, and other approaches to make working easier. These all can be important elements of a positive psychosocial work environment. And finally, there is the engagement of the organization with the larger society. Organizations don't exist in a societal vacuum. What they do, how they act, impacts society and impacts the people within society. While organizations may provide a positive work environment in many respects, there is also the issue of how that organization engages with public policy and broader social issues, because the way they engage can have direct impacts on workers' lives. And we have seen an increasing number of situations where workers have questioned their organization's stance regarding different public policy issues, different social issues, and even where they're sending campaign contributions. Now, I'm not saying that any of this is going to be easy for organizations to consider. And for sure, there is going to be a balancing act that organizations will have to perform. This is why it might be a good idea for organizations to have a management team in place with the last name Walenda. For organizations, it's important to remember that those organizations who do better will do better. And those organizations who do better by their employees will have employees that do better by them. And that the concept of a psychosocial work environment is a way of understanding that task.